Mayor Cross and honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen. Certainly a pleasure to be here, to speak to this group, but certainly to be back again in the Donegal area. It's certainly an area we look forward to visiting as often as possible. And in my short time here, this is my fourth visit, and we have a few more planned before too long. Why I like coming here, because it's so similar to home. And Mary mentioned I come from Newfoundland. I was born, brought up, still live in the same community. We never moved. Worked in other areas, had apartments while you were waiting to get home on the weekend or whenever you could. But we never moved away from our home in a little fishing community called Renews on the southern shore of Newfoundland, which was settled mainly by Irish. Well, I suppose I could say totally by Irish, as were many of the communities in our area. The whole area is now referred to from a tourism point of view as the Irish Loop. If you leave St. John's and you go south, you'll see the signs, you are entering the Irish Loop. And for a couple of 100 miles, you have this circle that goes right back to St. John's again, probably 40 communities along the route, all of them with close to 100% Irish ancestry. And listening to some of the discussions today and the points made, I'm just thinking about the similarities and the connections, the things we have in common. When we were talking about the Titanic Centre in Belfast, tremendous operation. In fact, we were here last year. We had some individuals talking about basically the conception and the start, and it's great to see how far it's advanced. It's going to be a tremendous boom to this area, because people don't come to Ireland to come to one little area. If people come from outside, and we're talking about tourism and investment, whatever, particularly tourism, people don't come for a day or 2 or 3 days. They come for at least a week. If you're going to pay the type of money we pay to get here and go through the routes that we have to go through to get here in some cases, me being 3.5 hours away by direct flight. My last trip was 23 hours. The one before that was 34 hours. So, and Paul talked about the same thing this morning. Paul loved this. So getting here is a major problem. So when people come, you want to stay for a while. So consequently, you want an overall experience. They're not going to go to one spot. The Titanic Centre can be a tremendous draw for the rest of the area, particularly the northern part of Ireland. And by working together, as a number of people who spoke suggested, that is where we start putting the total packages together. Communities coming together. I was interested in Dr. O'Keefe's speech, and some of the things he was saying were probably the same words we preached ourselves over the years in the small chain of communities in which we live, because I was involved, as Mary said, in rural development. We started the first Rural Development Association in our region, and I have always been involved. When I wasn't in politics, involved as a volunteer, and as politics, involved working with them. But one of the things we always talked about is that the decisions made about our community have to be made by us. The main decisions that are made in relation to our community, whether it be how we promote our tourism, what resources we develop, how they are developed, and the returns we get out, who benefits, these decisions have to be made by us. We have to be at the table, because otherwise, if we let others make the decision, who do you think is going to get the benefits? We have to make sure we control that we get our share. That's all we ask. That's all anybody asks. And if you do it properly, you'll find generally that can be achieved. But here, working together with Northern Ireland, with your friends across the border, I try to call it the island of Ireland, and not differentiate. But, there are so many resources that we share. But we just a few miles across the ocean share some of these resources and, as I say, things in common. And when you mentioned the Titanic, well, we're linked to the Titanic too, because when the Titanic sunk, the first message was received in Newfoundland and relayed from there at Cape Race, which is part of the Irish Loop, just south of where I live. When we talk about the Laurentic, which we'll commemorate tomorrow, 23 Canadians went down in that boat. 21 of them were from Newfoundland. When we talk about the Amazing Grace territory, well, before the ship captained by John Newton was practically wrecked off the coast of Ireland and found its way into Lough Swilly, where was the last stop it made? Newfoundland. And so the story goes on and on and on. These are the things that strengthen the connection. And one of the things we're trying to do, people like Paul Loftus, people like Lynn Loftus, with the release recently of the new website, people in our embassy, Suzanne and all our staff, what we're trying to do is build on these connections so that the people of Ireland are interested in the other side where we're connected and literally connected. In the case of a place called Valentia and in south of Kerry, as you know, Valentia Island, from where the first transatlantic cable was laid to Newfoundland. Well, we've been down there working with them now, and they are now tied into the town of Heart's Content in Newfoundland, where the other end of the cable exists, and they're talking about twinning and getting together, etc. The famine, probably, or, a lot of people don't like to use the word famine, probably we shouldn't, because as I believe Paul Loftus again said quite clearly, there was food at the time. It was just a matter of a lot of our people didn't get it and had to leave. Those who survived to leave, and those who survived the crossing helped build a better Canada. But that we should never forget, and in places like Rosseel and the Miramichi that opened their doors and their ports to our people from Ireland who went across. These things should not be forgotten. And people who went over there and stayed, and people who went long before the famine, like my own people were there in the late 1700s, settled in fishing communities and helped build the country. And in fact, the Irish, I believe the French and English, we talk about them in Canada, the two great nations, two great building nations. The Irish don't get the credit they deserve for the contribution they made for the building of that great country of Canada. Somewhere along the way they will. But we have so many people over there who have not had direct recent contact with their roots, who would love to. We have people here who wonder, where did our people go? And we hear about this new country that they settled and had to fight hard to settle there. These are the door openers. And these are the things that create the opportunities for greatly building our tourism. Some people just go year after year, down to the beaches of Florida from Canada when it gets cold. Head for Florida. Where else are you going to go? I'm on a break. Over here, they head for Spain or somewhere. Well, I tell you one thing. I've been in Florida several times. I would rather tour Ireland any day of the week. And I would think that people who go to the beaches of anywhere, if they got a chance to go to Canada, to experience the Rockies, to see the prairies, to go to places like Banff, to tour Ontario, to see Niagara Falls, to come into the ruggedness of Atlantic Canada, to go to old Quebec, which is just like visiting the heart of old France, to come to places like Newfoundland where all your cousins are. These are the things that will encourage tourism. And if we're going to get the people on that side to come here and build up our area, we need to collectively get together. And that's why when the day is over, it's great for people to come here and to talk and discuss different ideas. And there were a lot of different ideas discussed here today. The base for really doing something. But if we walk out of here this evening and we say, Boy, that was a great conference. We're going to have another one next year. And nobody does anything about what we learned or what we talked about. Next year, we'll be doing exactly the same thing. There'll be no more tourists around. The economy won't be any better, and we're no better off. The way to be successful, if you're going to make the whole concept of improving your area, of creating opportunities, whether it be unemployment, there are two types of tourism perhaps, and we talked about both here today. In fact, Tim O'Connor mentioned a couple of things of interest. He talked about the concept of Bay Street and Broadway. And you know, he hit the nail right on the head for a couple of reasons. Because two things really go hand in hand. A lot of people try to say, look, the cultural side and this tourism side and the artsy-fartsy stuff, like they say, there's no money in that. Oh no? Look at some of the very successful films that have been made here in Ireland, and you saw Derry Rowe talk about what's happening in Newfoundland. But look at the doors that culture opens. Do you know how we know a lot about Ireland? You talk to anybody in Newfoundland, he'll probably tell you more about Ireland than you know yourselves. Did we learn it from business? Did we learn it from history books? No, we didn't, because there's very little mention about the Irish in our history books. We learned most of it from music, because every town, river, building around Ireland, there's a song made up about it, and we know most of them, and they were brought over by our people, and we've been keeping up to date with the latest. Do you know who the best ambassador for Ireland has been on our side of the world for a number of years? You start thinking about all the great politicians, and you have wonderful ones. I mean, Mary McAleese tried to find somebody better than her, you know, Barry Robinson before, and so on. But I would venture to bet, if you did a poll in Newfoundland, who is recognized as the best promoter of Ireland, some of these names wouldn't be recognized. But Daniel O'Donnell would. Bridie Gallagher would. Why? Because of the music that everybody listens to. Some people listen to politicians, some people listen to business. Almost everybody listens to music or watches DVDs or watches film. So consequently, here is a real door opener, and the awareness is there. I spent yesterday on the other side, over around Downing, and anybody who hasn't been, and some people haven't, I talked to people here today, haven't been over to that area a few miles away. I mean, the beaches in that area are as good as anything in Florida. The scenery is spectacular, as it is true here, as it is if you continue into Derry and across to Belfast. And then if you want to do the whole island, you know, wherever you go. So is there something here to draw people and to keep them? Absolutely. But why isn't it happening to a large degree? Because we don't know enough about it. And this is our collective job. And forget our own little narrow parochial area, because we can promote all we like. If we don't get enough to attract people who want to come and stay for a while and make it worth their while, it ain't going to happen. But it's here. It is right here in just Donegal and tie in across the border. You have what it takes. You have the people to put it together. It's just a matter of rolling up your sleeves, using a little bit of help, and then doing it. The other side of the equation ties in with the business side, because there's tourism, those who want to come, spend money, have a good time, listen to the music, see the scenery. There are others who come, spend time, but they're looking. They're looking either for the opportunity to invest here or to encourage people to invest somewhere else. And every place needs investment, and that's where it comes back to making sure you're involved in this stuff. Because people say, why is Canada doing so well? Well, one of the things, we managed our finances fairly well. But we also are a land of small population, 35 million people, in a huge chunk of territory, rich in resources. And as we develop these resources, let me concentrate on Newfoundland, an island with a population of 500,000 that was Canada's poor cousin up to 15 years ago. But we developed our resources. We didn't let others come in and take control of that. We developed in the sense that we had a say in what was happening. We got the major part of the benefit, and we got the investments then in our education system and our social programs and our arts programs that we didn't have before. So can two things go hand in hand? Absolutely, if you can control what's happening. And that's the key to it all. So the opportunities are also here in that regard. Suzanne mentioned CETA, the Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement that's being negotiated between Canada and Europe. And a lot of people hadn't even heard of it, which amazes me. That free trade agreement will open up the corridors between our great country and all of Europe. And the tariffs and the trade barriers that for years prevented this free flow of trade hopefully will be put aside. And agricultural products, for which Ireland is known so well, and you have the best agricultural products in the world, I have said that wherever I go. We probably have the best fish products in the world, and we have trouble getting into the European markets because of the high tariffs. The stopping off point for anything we are sending to Europe is Ireland. And we see there are some people in this very area who bring in fish products, for instance. Secondary processing, value added here on this side, creating jobs, moving it on to the markets. Again, the sky is the limit in relation to stuff like that. So the free trade agreement does a couple of things. Gives us the opportunity to increase jobs, no doubt about it. But it also will bring more people here from a business perspective, which undoubtedly, when they open up eyes, add to our tourism potential. The big detriment to a lot of this, and we can tie in Belfast Airport. We talked about Belfast Airport here this morning, the potential it had, the potential it has. We have the opportunity to move a tremendous amount of product, freight, through these areas. This will also lead to more business people travel, etc. However, the biggest detriment is direct flights. If I want to go home tomorrow, I fly to London, I fly from London back over Ireland, I fly over Newfoundland to Toronto for 3 hours, I stay there for 5 or 6 hours, fly 3 more hours back to Newfoundland. So 24 hours after I leave here, I get home. Whereas if I could get on a plane in Belfast or Dublin, fly directly into St. John's, it takes me 3.5 hours. Our priority at the mission, the priority of people like Paul Loftus and the other side, and almost everybody will get involved with Tourism Ireland, the city of Dublin, Belfast is involved now, they're pushing it. You have, on the other side, airports, you have chambers of commerce, etc. We are trying to establish direct routes to Ireland from Canada. From a tourism perspective and a business perspective, that is the key. And if we can accomplish that, then everything else, I think, will start falling in place. So there are just so many things, and you could go on for days, but there are so many things that we have in common between our great country of Canada and this country of Ireland. And a lot of the reasons why we have so much in common is because we are the same people. 4.5 million people in Canada of Irish descent, like I say, 50% in my own province. And then you're dealing, you think the same, we feel the same, we have the same stands on most issues, nationally and internationally. So is there any reason why we shouldn't be doing more collectively? And the answer to that is no. And I think the other major program we have at the embassy, the International Experience Canada, where last year we provided work permits to 5,000 young Irish people. This year we've been given an increase, 5,350, small, but still an increase. Some people say, well, we're losing our young. And to an extent, they're leaving, but you're not losing them, because if the work isn't here right now, to go where there is work and to get experience and to bring it back home, that's not losing them. If they stay home with nothing to do, unless we can put things together, but that takes time. That's how you lose them. So we're willing, love to see young Irish people coming. No culture problems, no language problems. They fit in, they're doing well. And the experiences gained will always be brought back home, because as I've said over and over, they say the only people in heaven who want to go home are the Irish. And I think that's so true. So again, if you start piecing it all together, we have a lot in common, we are doing things together, but there's a lot more we can do, and it should start as we leave this room today. Thank you very much.